Hello, everybody, and welcome back to my channel. Today, we are finally talking about the Xbox Series X. That's right, baby. The infamous Tower of Power, the world's most strongest mini fridge, and the obelisk of destruction. Seeing as most of you probably haven't been able to get an Xbox Series X due to scalpers and low stock, I've taken it upon myself to drop some knowledge on you folks and let you know whether or not I think the Series X is worth it. Given as I had the console since November, I've had plenty of time to sit back, relax, and reflect on what Microsoft has given us. Let's get into it. Okay, let's start things off by talking about probably two of the most controversial things about the Xbox Series X. One, which is its ridiculous name.
Welcome, Phil Spencer.
Xbox Series X will lead us into the future of console gaming.
Let's talk about Microsoft's unconventional way of naming systems. You go from the Xbox, Xbox 360, to the confusing Xbox One, which is the all-in-one console, and then the Xbox One X, and then the Xbox Series X, which can be confusing for people who don't play video games, okay? Now, I understand Microsoft rectified this problem by, discontinuing the Xbox One X, but I'm sure we've all read those articles where someone accidentally bought an Xbox One X because there's still some, circulating in the market. What they should have done is right after the 360, bam, Xbox 720, bam, Xbox 1520. Like, you got options here, Microsoft. I understand you didn't want to name your console Xbox 2 or Xbox 3 because it'll be behind PlayStation, which will make people think that it's not as new as the new PlayStation. For example, PlayStation 5 versus Xbox 4. People who don't play games might think to themselves, the PlayStation is newer. The next topic that everyone seems to have is the Rogers box. If you're from Canada and you have your old Rogers box of your internet, it's probably pretty much a cut and paste version of this. How they designed the Xbox Series X, a little bit problematic. People think it looks ugly. I've had it. I think it looks great vertically, but I don't have the privilege of putting this console vertically in my entertainment setup. I have to put this thing down horizontally, and let me tell you, horizontally, this thing looks ugly. I don't know what they did with the next gen consoles, but the horizontal version of both of these next gen consoles are hideous, and the Xbox Series X is no difference. It's just a gigantic block in your entertainment setup. But I can hear it now. I can hear people now saying, I don't care how the system looks like, which is true. At the end of the day, who cares how the system looks? It could look like a freaking triangle, or like it could look like the Oya. Okay, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter how the system looks like. All that matters is what powers the system and how good it is. And when it comes to that department, Microsoft knocked it out of the park. Okay, they managed to fit 12 teraflops of compute units into the Xbox Series X, making it the world's most powerful console. Now, I know PC gamers are going to be blah, 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 blah. Listen, it's not comparing with your $4,000, $3,000 PC, your GTX 3070 or your 3080s. It's its own thing. And in terms on paper, it is the world's most powerful console. And unfortunately, it really doesn't have much to show for it outside of the Gears 5 DLC. But you know what? It's the start of the gen. There's a lot more to come. People are just scratching the surface of these consoles. So we'll see if the world's most powerful console actually ends up, showing games running like it's running on the world's most powerful console. Instead, it comes with a custom SSD in it, making it powered by Velocity architecture, which makes games load really quick. And when I say quick, I mean quick. You got 5, 8, 10 seconds, you're in the game, and that's it. And on top of that, they have a nice feature called Quick Resume, where if you're in another game and then you decide to click off and go into another game, you will be started at your last point. So, example, I'm playing Ori and the Will of the Wisp. I'm on a boss. My friend invites me to play Call of Duty Modern Warfare. Hop into Call of Duty Modern Warfare, do a couple of rounds. Friends sign offline. I'm by my lonesome self again. And then I hop into Ori Will and the Wisp and then start right off that boss fight in a matter of seconds, 3 or 4 seconds. And I know what people are thinking. Oh, quick resume. There's no point for that. I'm not playing multiple games at once. But that's not the point. The point is, you don't have to be playing multiple games. You can be playing one game, and then when someone invites you to another game, you go in and you play, and you go back to the last game, you're right where you left off. On top of that, my Xbox Series X is unplugged right now. When I go plug this thing back in, all the games that I have that are on quick resume are going to be still on quick resume. When I click on, what am I playing now? Immortals Phoenix Rising. I'm going to get that little quick resume icon and I'm be starting off right where I left off, despite the console being unplugged, which I think is a great feature. Another thing that I feel like I should mention is setting up the Series X is extremely easy. I literally just unplugged my Xbox One X, plugged in my Series X, loaded up my profile, and that's it. All my games came with me. They read games off my hard drive. All my save files were there in the cloud. I didn't have to do anything. And given features like smart delivery, all my games that were Series X optimized were updated to or upgraded to their Series X version, which again, something I have to give Microsoft for because it's very convenient. I don't want to have to unhook my system and then play 142 games in order to get my system working properly. The Series X, that was no problem whatsoever. You plugged it in, load up your profile, games are there, save files are there, and right away when you try to play something, the system says, hey, there's a Series X version of this game. Do you want to upgrade it? Click upgrade, bam, you have the Series X version, just like that. So I gotta give props to Microsoft for that, because it's not easy implementing all these features. These are all well thought out, methodical, features that they made sure to implement for the consumer to make the consumer's life easier. And I gotta respect them for it. Microsoft this time around went with a more, if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of way for consoles. They went with let's play it safe. And when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about the OS with the new gen. Now, Microsoft, what they did was they released all the features that were coming with the Series X earlier. If anyone's been in the Xbox camp, you remember they released that blog post where they're talking about, oh, these are the new features that are coming to the Xbox Series X. Now, those features launched prior to the console coming, which is the heavy phone integration, the new app, the transitions, and just the overall layout of the console. So when you plug in your Series X, you don't have that new feeling. Like, sure, when you load up the console, you get a nice new intro, but once you get into the console, the layout is the exact same, more or less, as the Xbox One. Now, whether or not you're a fan of that is totally up to you. Some people enjoy the familiarity. They don't have to learn a new system. Me personally, I always like something new to give me that wow next gen factor. I'm the type of guy that likes to go around all the new settings and see what it can do. Poke around in the menus. Now, it's not to say that there's nothing new. There's now dynamic backgrounds. You have the little squiggly lines. You have an interactive background that's going on. You have things such as you can now customize the layout. So if you want to have party chat somewhere else on your home button, you can. You can load out custom tiles, delete things you don't want. So the whole experience of the UI, it's very customizable, but it is that same feeling of the Xbox One. So when you load it up and you put it in for the first time, you don't really have that new wow factor that this is next gen. This is something new and exciting. It kind of is like, all right, like I got a stronger Xbox now, which, as I said, some people are okay with it. Some people are kind of and they're not okay with it. When it comes to familiarity, you have the OS, but you are not going to get as much familiarity as you're going to get when you put the new Xbox Series X controller in your hand. It's not to say that there aren't differences. There are. There definitely is. After using this controller for a couple of months, I can tell right away when I'm holding an Xbox One controller and when I'm holding a Series X controller. And that's ignoring the tactile features that they put on it, the little bumps that they put on the triggers. Overall, it's smaller, it fits better in my hand, and this sounds cliche, but I can't go back to an Xbox One controller after having a Series X controller in my hand. Which leads into the next great thing that Xbox has done. Now, when you look at the PlayStation 5, one of the hot topics they have is the DualSense controller. They've reinvented Rumble and overall the feel of what it feels like to have a controller in your hand. You know, if you look at my old PlayStation 5 rundown, you can tell PlayStation put a lot of work into that controller, and it adds a whole entire new experience to playing games. When it comes to the Xbox Series X, they played it safe. As you see, the controller is very similar to Xbox One. However, it's a bit of a trade-off. It's a bit of a double-edged sword, because by them not implementing a completely new controller, they've made it so all controllers are now forward compatible and backwards compatible. So if you have 6, 7 Xbox One controllers, you have your custom Titanfall controller, you have your Cyberpunk controller, you have your Sea of Thieves controllers, those controllers are all going to work on your Xbox Series X. When you go home, when you bring this bad boy home, you don't have to buy 3, 4 controllers to play with your friends if you have already invested in the Xbox ecosystem, which is something that I got to give props to Microsoft for. I'm not a fan of when you buy a new system, all of a sudden everything you have before doesn't mean anything. Your controllers don't mean anything, your headsets don't mean anything. Every bit of investment you did into that infrastructure, into that environment, is now meaningless. With the Xbox and the Series X, they made sure to completely eradicate that problem. If you bought yourself an Xbox Elite controller back in the day for $200, and you thought to yourself, oh my god, this isn't going to work with the Series X, it does. Imagine buying an Elite controller in whatever for September, October, and then when you get the new next gen console, it doesn't work. That would be the worst investment for a company. That'd be the worst blowback for a company. And on top of that, headsets work as well. So while Microsoft didn't go the extra mile to reinvent the controller, I appreciate that all my accessories are forward compatible and backwards compatible. Another feature that Microsoft heavily invested in, which in my opinion greatly paid off, is backwards compatibility. Okay. Microsoft made sure when you buy your Series X, you have your Xbox Series X games. Almost all your Xbox One games work. I think just Kinect games don't work because Kinect existed at one point. And a good majority of Xbox 360 games work, and the original Xbox games work, which is a phenomenal feature, especially for new gamers that are coming into the Xbox ecosystem. See, I've been gaming since the 90s. I was there for the original Xbox. I was there for 360. Obviously, I was there for Xbox One. So I've played all the latest and greatest. Am I going to go back and revisit some of these titles? Probably not. But if I was a teenager or I just got into gaming and I got an Xbox Series X, I can go back and play most of the classics. I can play Knights of the Old Republic. I can play Gears 1, 2, and 3, Halo 1, 2, and 3. I can play Fusion Frenzy. I can play Lost Odyssey. And that's not without having to own multiple consoles to play it. And on top of that, the Xbox even has updated some of these older games. Take a look at Red Dead Redemption 1, has a 4K patch. Take a look at the original Assassin's Creed, has a 4K patch. So not only does it run backwards compatible games, but it also runs them better. And that's not even before you go into the new feature that the Series X does that the Xbox One X doesn't do, which is auto HDR. Let's use a game I played recently, Vermintide 2. So I've never played a Vermintide game before in my life. I saw that I had a Series X patch called up my cousin, say, hey, you want to try Vermintide 2? Sure, why not? As soon as I load up Vermintide 2, that little auto HDR symbol came on top of my screen, and it let me know that they were now using HDR in a game that never had HDR to begin with. Do you understand that? The Xbox itself is implementing HDR into a game that never had HDR ever. And in my opinion, at least in the case of Vermintide, it added to the visual quality of the game. Sure, the Series X patch made everything nicer, but when it came to the colors, when it came to the lighting, I felt like the HDR really made the game pop. The Series X is a tricky console because for the first time ever, we've had mid-gen upgrades. In previous generations, this is something that's never happened. It's new specifically to this last gen. And what these mid-gen upgrades did for both the PlayStation and the Xbox is they took away that wow factor, at least in the terms of graphics, when it came from jumping from an old gen to a new gen. My jump from an Xbox One to an Xbox One X was a huge, like, you noticed it right away. You notice the 4K right away, the graphic fidelity being improved, you notice that stuff right away. The jump from the Xbox One X to the Xbox Series X, not so much. What you will notice are frame rates, because there's a stronger CPU in here. A lot of games are using higher frame rates. Destiny 2, now in 60 FPS, even 120 FPS. Modern Warfare Warzone could run 120 FPS. So the jump from the Xbox One X to the Series X, while as of this moment, because nothing is fully utilizing what the Series X is capable of, that graphical jump that you get from gens isn't something you're really going to notice. Which makes it an interesting selling point. Because if you are coming from the base Xbox, and I mean that old fat VCR Xbox, or even the Xbox One S, when you go from that console to a Series X, you're going to get that next gen feel. Because you're going from a sub 1080p gaming console to now a full 4K 60 FPS gaming console, even 120 FPS console. So whether or not you want to go to the Series X, in my opinion, really matters on what you're currently playing on. Oh, no. God damn it. This is the hard part of the review. This is the part as someone who primarily plays on Xbox, this is the hardest part of ever talking about Xbox and Microsoft, which is the narrative that Xbox has no games. Now, I'm going to straight up say that's not something I agree with. I've enjoyed my Xbox One. There's plenty of games that I enjoyed. It has the King of Racers, Forza, it has Gears, it has Halo, it has Ori and the Will of the Wisps. They created new IPs like one of my favorites, Sea of Thieves. But this narrative tends to shift where it's like, okay, Xbox has games, but it doesn't have those AAA system seller wow factors, at least compared to its competition, which is something that's kind of hard to argue against. Is I feel like Microsoft is kind of focusing all its energy on a different type of game that isn't story driven. But when it comes to the Series X, Jesus, I can't even defend the launch. The Xbox Series X has to be one of the poorest launched systems game-wise, okay? This thing didn't launch with anything. Like what? What were you gonna tell me? Gears Tactics? Seriously? This is one of your launch titles, Gears Tactics, a PC game that came out, months ago, and this is your flagship launch title. Xbox and 343 took a major hit when they couldn't get Halo Infinite at time, which just sent their launch into a nosedive. Without Halo Infinite, there's nothing to support this console game-wise on its launch. You have Gears Tactics, you have Bright Memory, which is literally 2 hours, and don't even get me started on Bright Memory because it doesn't feel like a next gen, and I'm pretty sure it isn't a next gen game. Sure, it's only playable on the Series X, but when you load up Bright Memory, you're not like, wow, I can't believe this is a Series X game. I don't see this game being playable at all on the Xbox One. No. I don't know. That's about it. There's nothing really to talk about until Halo Infinite comes out next year. Besides, we have the Medium, which is coming out on the 28th, which is a game I'm personally, really hyped for. But that's not a AAA game, in my opinion at least. That's more of a AA game coming from a third-party studio. And sure, Microsoft has showed all these games that are coming out. You got Avowed, you got Fable, you have Perfect Dark. But I don't know if these games are coming out in 2021. And regardless, you need games at your launch to sell the system. There was no wow factor on the Series X launch. When I bought it and I brought it home, I wasn't like, oh my God, it's time to play Gears freaking Tactics. No, I literally put it in and I'm just like, all right, let me play some old games that are optimized for Series X. Which, it's kind of a good thing. It does have a lot of optimized games for the system. You have most, if not all, their first-party games have Series X patches. Grounded, Sea of Thieves, Halo Master Chief Collection, Forza Horizon, which looks amazing. But when you buy a new system, you want new games that show off that system. And sure, these old games make, the Series X graphics look great. There's nothing that makes you go, wow, like this is blowing my mind right now. For example, okay, when I was coming out of the 360 days or the PS3 days, when I was watching E3 and Microsoft came on stage and they showed Rise, I was floored. When I saw Rise graphics, even to this day, despite the gameplay problems that Rise has, graphically speaking, that game looked amazing. And I knew when I saw that game, this game would not be able to run on Xbox 360. Dead Rising 3, all the zombies on screen. I was like, wow, how could it manage this graphic fidelity with all these zombies on screen? Even Forza looked great. And these were next-gen exclusive games that were exclusive to the Xbox One, which let people know that next-gen is starting and this is what you can expect graphic-wise. And there's no Rise game for the Series X. There's not that game you could point to and be like, wow, this looks incredible. This is what the future of gaming is going to look like. And it's a real shame. It's a real shame that the console doesn't have that system showcase. Unfortunately, with the Series X, as I said, it has a lot of optimized games that are old, but I've played all these old games. Fancier graphics isn't going to make me go back and play these old games again. For people who haven't played any of these games and they just got an Xbox Series X for the first time, sure, that's a great feature to have. Playing Forza at the best quality you can, Gears at the best quality, Halo, Ori at 120 FPS, Sea of Thieves, Wasteland, even though it's not exclusive, but playing these games on the Series X for the first time, you're going to have a good time. But as me and the vast majority of hardcore gamers, they've played all these games, and just because there's a Series X patch isn't enough to make me go back. But this leads into the next thing about Xbox, which is the system seller for Xbox. This is the groundwork that Microsoft has been building when it comes to Xbox as a brand, and that is Game Pass, okay? Game Pass. Game Pass, there's just simply nothing out there that can compete with Game Pass in value and features. You subscribe to Game Pass Ultimate, you have EA Access, you have Xcloud, you have Xbox Gold, you have Game Pass for Xbox, and you have Game Pass for PC. All that in one subscription service. And so you just brought your system home for the first time, you didn't buy anything, you subscribe to Game Pass, bam, right away you have over 200 games you can play. And every exclusive that's coming out on Xbox is coming to Game Pass on day one. Halo Infinite, day one. Flight Simulator, day one. Just now in January, the Medium, day one. And there's just nothing out there in the market that could compete with Game Pass. And to me, that is one of the main reasons to own an Xbox. It's what differentiates it from any other console out there. You can now take your Xbox everywhere you want to go. With Xcloud, You have your phone, you have a controller, you've gone on vacation. Well, not during 2020, during obvious reasons, but you go anywhere else when the world is in lockdown to shit. You have your Xbox with you with just carrying your phone around. And that's something I greatly appreciate. It's something I use almost all the time. When I used to go on vacations before everything got shut down, I would take my controller, take my phone, and there you go. I'm playing Xbox. So, how has my life been like with the Series X? The load times, phenomenal. You know, when I play games on a hard drive, I think my game's lagging. I sometimes I think it's frozen, but it's still, loading. Um, all my stuff working with the system, all my controls carrying over. Once again, it's another feature I like. The console's selling point to me is its value and its convenience. I got Gamepass. Whenever I'm bored, I hop on, see what new games are on it, and I can play it. Right now, I'm playing through Torchlight 3 with a couple of my friends. That's a game that I would never have bought, but since it's free on Game Pass, I can try it out. And right now, I'm enjoying it. Haven, another game which I would never have bought, I'm enjoying it as well. So as of right now, it's not going to floor you in terms of next gen feeling. It's still overall a great system to have. It's just that it doesn't necessarily feel like you're owning a new system, like you have entered into the 8th gen or whatever gen we're in. It doesn't feel like you've entered into a new gen. It feels like you've got a stronger Xbox One X, for better or for worse. So it's that you might lose out on some of that excitement of being unfamiliar with the UI and learning it. That excitement, I would have appreciated if Microsoft came with newer features for the system. Maybe they didn't have to overdo the UI, but they could have added new features into the system. Just look at, with the PlayStation, they have the picture-in-picture mode for party chat. They have the quick cards that you jump around from achievement to achievement. These are new features that, I would have greatly appreciated with the Xbox Series X, but they didn't really release anything new. But my experience with it has been, I can't lie, it's been great. I'm playing older games that now have auto HDR. I playing constantly new games on Game Pass. I'm experiencing, better graphic fidelity. So it's been, a great time with the system. It's one of those things that I wouldn't go back to my Xbox One X, and I don't regret owning the console, despite it not releasing with that new system seller exclusive. Overall, it does an all-around very good job on handling, accessories, games, all that kind of stuff. Do I think it's something that you need right now if you don't have it? Not really. It's definitely a luxury item. If you have the money to get it, sure. If you want to wait for new games to come out or for the price to drop, in all honesty, you're not missing out on much. If you have an Xbox One X, you're not missing out on much besides, as I said, like frame rates improvement. If you're coming from an Xbox One and you have the money to get a Series X, I would highly recommend it. But in terms of, is it something that you need absolutely right now that you're going to go sell all your belongings to get? No. I really think that this gen has been a weaker gen starting off than the 360 and PS2 or PS3, the Xbox One and the PS4. Those kind of had those wow factors when it came to next gen. When it comes to the Series X, that wow factor is simply not there. But at the same time, it is a great console. If you're looking for an all around great system, especially if you haven't invested in the Xbox ecosystem yet and you're a new person to Xbox, the Xbox Series X has your back. But for now, it feels like you're kind of betting on the future with Microsoft. You're kind of betting that all these new games they announce come out soon and that they're good. But I think it's a risk or a bet that's going to pay off in the end. All right, hardcore gamers. Enough about what I have to say about the Series X. Tell me what you have to say about the Series X. Do you agree with some of the statements I made? Do you disagree with some of the statements I made? Do you have a Series X? And if you do, are you enjoying it? Once again, you know, if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more of it, feel free to leave a comment down below about your opinion on the next gen consoles. Try to keep it civil. I know there's a lot of tribalism in the gaming community these days, and everyone's just looking for any excuse to chew the other person out. But remember, we are all united as gamers. This is all our passion. You know, we're not enemies. Everyone can enjoy gaming together. So, hit that subscribe button. It helps the channel more than you know. Hit that button. It's greatly appreciated. Ring that little bell so you're always notified of when I upload. I'll try to be a little bit more consistent this time. It's been quite a gap between the last video and this video. If you're curious to what I had to say about the PlayStation 5, feel free to click that link, and I will see you all in the next video. Daskillva out.